Hey everybody, today we're going to be talking about Sins of a Solar Empire 2, which is a space RTS grand strategy 4X kind of game. It most similarly plays like kind of a Warcraft 3 meets Supreme Commander in space. For those of you guys who don't know what that is because you were born in the last 2 decades, I'll be sure to explain everything to you, so you don't need to know any of this. Now, for those of you guys who watch my channel a lot, you've probably seen that I play a lot of those sorts of games. I play all the different Paradox games, in this case particularly Stellaris. I play Total War. I play all those sorts of games that might give me a little bit more perspective on these sorts of games than somebody else, which in turn allows me to tell you a little bit more on the technical side, whether or not this game is doing something good or bad, and whether or not it's worth your time and effort to buy, learn, play, etc. So this review is going to be a little bit more of a technical kind of review, but I will be explaining the game. I'll be going over the game and things like that. Just don't expect me to do just sort of like a plot review, tell you about all the gameplay systems. I will be going over the gameplay systems, but just know this will also be a little bit more on the technical side of things. So let's talk then about the game and things like that. This game does feel a little bit rushed. Although I do overall have a positive opinion on this game, I will be giving it a fair perspective on a lot of different things. This game does seem a little bit rushed, which will be evident. Now, you did see that I had 64 hours in the game. So I've put about 10 hours per day into this game since launch, so I think I'm doing pretty good on that perspective. Everything launches really quickly, loading into a game, loading out of a game, starting up the game, any of that sort of stuff. So it does launch really quickly, but you will see kind of the rushedness of the game is evident here. This game does seem very much they wanted to get the game to live, and they wanted to make sure that they had as many features as they had from the first game, because it's Sins of a Solar Empire 2. Obviously, it's a sequel to Sins of a Solar Empire 1. You get it? So it does seem that they wanted as many features and things like that as they could, but they maybe didn't have as much time as they could have had to do as many features as they could have had. So, I mean, obviously, the first thing you'll notice here is there's no menu. There's no start screen, anything like that. Up at the top, we got single player, multiplayer, LAN, replays, and modding. So, from that perspective, we have all the main things that we should have, but we don't have a main menu or anything like that. If we look over the UI and we look over, kind of, maybe it wasn't the best made. Lots of dead space here. The icons seem a little bit small. They could maybe make these things a little bit bigger. We don't have many options on sound or graphics. We can't choose a resolution or we have a resizable window, but we can't choose a resolution or anything like that. So far as actual graphics options, we don't have many of those. We have nothing in sound. User interface gets a little bit better. Bit of advice for those of you guys who are new to this game. Turn partial suction stacking off. Turn advanced tooltips on. Even if you're new to the game, advanced tooltips will give you more information on what you're building and help you actually understand what you're doing a little bit better. For key binding, we do have all the key binds that you would generally want in a game like this. Those of you who want to be flying through your planets, clicking on things as quickly as possible, managing stuff, we do have all the key bindings that you would want, although some things aren't key bound by default, which maybe they should be. We do pretty much have all the key bindings that we'd want. We get development, planet, defense, logistics, commerce, mining, research. I'll get into what those are later, but you can go through all these things. We got use minor affection abilities, all this stuff here. So there's really no let's say difficulty in key binding and getting things to exactly how you want. And a lot of people do want that in RTS games. If you don't have this sort of stuff, even if you're not using it, you'll very quickly notice it when it's not there. So we got all the different hotkeys for all this sort of stuff. Okay, so from that perspective, everything kind of works out there. I'm going to be going through, I'll be like going in and out of games just to show you guys stuff. I have a list of things on the right I want to go over in order to try to keep these things ordered. So there's the UI. As we go through the game more and more, you can see that the UI isn't the greatest. I'll go into the ship things later, but the ship icons, I mean, They can look very similar, especially as you go later in, which I'll get into later. These are actually two different kinds of ships. Seeker vessel and assembly drone are actually different. Yet, despite at a glance, they don't really look like they have that much of a difference right there. As for, oh, here, let me show you this real quick here. I got a little bit of issues with the tooltips themselves, beyond just the ship icons and things like that. If we actually had the actual tooltips themselves, there is some problems here on the tooltips. Now, I did load in and out of two different games there really quickly, so you can see those loading times are like, bam! My computer's not even, I mean, it's still a high-end PC, but it's not like completely up to date. I'm like a generation out of order here. So I've just been glad I haven't seen any lag or anything like that. The game functions really well. But if we look here at a tooltip here, we can see the Supreme Center for Human Doctrine. Max speed 15%, max damage, sorry, weapon damage 15%. Where? I don't know. For the planet, for everyone around it? I don't know. But if you look at the flavor text, this grand and imposing facility broadcasts a human-centric messages to ships at this planet up to 2 jumps away. Oh. Well, if you go to your ships and you highlight it, you can actually see that ships, but not the defenses, are impacted by human doctrine inspiration. So yes, all ships get this up to 2 jumps away, but you had to read the flavor text to figure that out. One thing that I and many other people just figured out today was in particular Savage Thrill. It gives all your capital ships in Titan weapon damage and weapon reload, which is really good. It buffs all your capital ships in Titans. But if you read the flavor text here, Fury overtakes a fleet as it bombs enemy planets, granting ships a faster rate of fire and increased weapon damage. Well, actually, the way it does work is if one of your capital ships or your Titan is bombing a planet, every ship within the well gets 15% weapon reload reduction and 15% weapon damage increase. Now, just to be clear, this weapon reload is actually totally wrong. It's not weapon reload, it's attack speed increase. Despite functioning extremely differently, this is not actually what you think it is. So weapon reload minus 15% is actually attack speed plus 15%. Totally different, not at all the same function. This would mean if weapon reload minus 15, sorry, if you had minus 50% weapon reload, that would mean you would shoot twice as fast for double damage. But that's not how it works. If this, I assure you, this does actually get really impactful because let me quick build a ship here so I can show you one item in particular that's very impacted by this tooltip not exactly working properly. If I look at this, it has physical weapon reload minus 40%. With a technology I can get up here, this gives it physical weapon reload minus 80%. You would assume this gives it times 5 damage then, right? You're almost shooting you are shooting 5 times faster, but it actually isn't that. It's weapon attack speed plus 80%. So here's the problem. Plus 80% attack speed is like 40% more damage. Not 500% damage, 40%. Do you get the problem here? So those tooltips don't, some of these things don't work quite right, and definitely they should be looking into some of this stuff. Flavor tooltips, the tech's obsolete anti-piracy weapons are replaced by their first military-grade autocannons featuring improved reliability and damage. This flavor text means absolutely nothing and isn't needed to learn. This one is 100% needed, and you definitely do need to read it to learn what it does. Do you get the problem here? Tooltips in this game can be difficult, and learning new factions can be a pain as you try to read through every different flavor text to realize, do I need this flavor text? Do I not need this flavor text? It can be a bit difficult. I'm going to get over that. Hopefully you guys understand why this is a problem and not great, but there are a lot of things to go over, so I don't want to dwell only on the negatives. Let's talk about game modes. In a previous video, I talked about what game modes an RTS needs: a campaign, co-op, multiplayer, and modding / custom maps. This game unfortunately does not have a campaign, but it does have co-op, and it does have a thriving co-op / multiplayer community. I'll get into multiplayer in a second, but right now we might not see any open games for co-op, but we can see casual versus AI, casual versus AI, casual, free-for-all, that's not versus AI, normal versus AI. People do play these games, they do host them up. Now, the lobby browser doesn't show every open game, which can actually be really irritating, and you can't sort by game time, but you can, if you sort if you look at game time that's open, we can see that here's a casual free-for-all that I can join at a whim. So co-op does have a community. It is vibrant. You can play co-op versus AI. As for multiplayer itself, we can highlight any of these open games. We can look at the settings. This is a really fast game. Holy crap. But we can see here's a 6-player free-for-all that I could join up, which somehow has 0 players. That doesn't seem quite right. Alternatively, I could host my own and it could fill up with people. I could either post a code in their Discord for people to join, or I could just wait for people to join on their own. I haven't really had any issues, even late at night, finding games with people. So doesn't really seem to be any issue there. The community does seem to be pretty big. Player count's going down slowly, but every game has their player count go down slowly. For an RTS game that has no campaign or anything like that, and everything needs to be played in kind of these sorts of games, there does seem to be a very large community. So that's going pretty good. As for modding and custom maps, there's modding. There is a modding community. Now, I don't know how much you can do with these different mods or custom maps or things like that, but they seem to be doing pretty good. Surely as time goes on, more and more people will continue to make more mods and the game will get more moddable. I have downloaded maps and things like that from multiplayer. So this is a custom map. It is not part of the base game and it's provided by the host. So if I join this, I would download his custom game. It does sometimes do that, but you get the idea here, right? So it's pretty easy to join this stuff. It's pretty easy to do custom maps. Pretty easy to do that. Blah, blah, blah. Let's talk about random games. Okay, to show you, random maps, because you can see here we can do random 2-player, random 4-player, random 10-player. How good do these random maps roll up? Well, in order to do that, I'm going to pick one completely at random. I'm just going to, with my eyes closed, let's just pick one. I have no idea which one this is. I've never played on it. Well, actually, I mean, this is a replay. So there is a replay system in the game, and I show you the replay system. For the most part works. It just replays through the game itself. So you can see here, with less players, it works better. With more players, it'll be a bit slower. It can take up to like 20-30 minutes to reach late game. Like 2-3 hours in, it can take a little bit of time if you're playing like a 10-man free-for-all, right? But if I pause here and I unveil the Fog of War, we can see this is a totally random game. I chose randomly from the list. Every player seems to have 2 safe worlds. So here's a 4-man free-for-all. Every player's got 2 safe worlds. There seems to be, most players have 2 worlds by expansion. So this guy's got 2 to his right, 1 to his left. This guy's got 1 to his right, 1 to his left, but the one on his right. So you can see some players, it's fair, but some players get a little bit more fair. I'm going to put it that way. It's fair, but some players get a bit more fair of a way about it. So every player's got 3 areas in the middle of the map they can shoot for. You see that? Everyone's got 3, but this guy's is a bit less fair. So he's got a bit harder of a time. But he does have 1 world that is a bit more safe for him to go to. There is planet orbit, and you can see here some of the times some areas that some people get will orbit around, which means that even if you're doing a free-for-all map, it will slowly change. And the orbits will continue to go after an hour. This is only 1 hour of orbits. These games can go on for a while. So the random map generation is pretty fair. Everyone's starter zones will be about the same. It is a space game as you get into the middle of the map. Some people are going to have more fair of a time. Some people have less fair of a time, but everyone's about equal with each other. So the random map, I really don't have many complaints about it. It's pretty much always worked for me to always at least start the games in a fair position. And then, as you guys know, from there you'll go. That was actually one of the more unfair ones I've ever seen. So let me choose another one. Once again, let me go completely on random, just so I'm not trying to rig it. So we've got a random 5-player map. So did it make a balanced 5-player map? Let's, once again, everyone starts with 2 worlds. Sometimes it'll be a 2-world start. Sometimes I've seen 3, 4. I've even seen some maps give you everyone a fair 5-world start. So you can see a 5-player map. Is this 5-player or 6? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Yeah, it's 5-player. That's the Vasari player. He doesn't start the game with a world. If I scroll forward a little bit, yeah, okay. I hope we get the idea. Vasari will do it. So as you go in here, everyone's got 2 worlds to their own. Looks like everyone's got about 2-3 worlds they can shoot in the middle for once again. Yeah, so once again, even with a 5-player map, it does look like this guy got a little bit lucky with that stuff, but as time goes on, it's not showing it so great in the replay. I'm wondering if I pause. No, okay. Yeah, okay, the replay, when you're looking at replay, but you'll see here, these worlds will eventually make new connections. So his start is a little bit safe here, but as time goes on, well, I guess both these players are a little bit safer of a start, but as time goes on, it's going to rotate these, and it looks like this asteroid might become a point of contention between the two of them. So the random map generation does work. I'll show you it does work. I've played through many games. And let me just show one more. 3 times the charm, right? So this is actually a game I'll be showing you later, and this is a 2v2 map, and once again we can see everybody starts. Oh, we actually had 2 Visari Exodus here. Everyone starts, you get 2 safe worlds, 2 worlds that you and your teammate then can share between. Some worlds in the super middle. Looks like there's 3 rotating worlds in the super middle everyone's gonna have to fight over, but once again we have another fair match. So random map generation, I just want to show you guys, because in these sorts of space games, random map generation could be a huge point of contention, as you really have to, if random map generation is bad, you can end up in a game that's not very replayable, because all you can do is play the pre-built maps, and playing on random maps can really suck. But this game, I assure you, the random map generation, very rarely, and by the way, you have to discover everything, so some players will have an easier time discovering things than other players, so it really does play out. It also plays out, you know, do I know where all the worlds are? Can I go rush a world? Am I going to take a risk, you know, or am I going to find that there was an extra world and oh no, you know, stuff like that. So for random map generation, this game's very replayable on that. Okay. Let's be done talking about random map generation. It works. I have had no complaints on it. It's going great. Let's go single player. How many different factions do we have here? We have Tech, Advent, and Visari. Split between those, we have Tech Enclave, Tech Primacy, Advent Reborn, Advent Wrath, Visari Exodus, Visari Alliance. The best way to describe these factions is you're going into your kitchen and every faction has the same ingredients as each other. Tech Enclave and Tech Primacy have the same ingredients, but whereas Tech Enclave made bacon, lettuce, and tomato with a side of mayo, Tech Primacy took their bread and they made a bologna and ham sandwich with some mayo, right? Both of them have the same ingredients, but they use them in different ways. They all have the same base units. They do have different titans between them, but they have these very many different technologies that can emphasize different parts or completely add different gameplay options to each other. Now, in a game like Total Warhammer, you might be able to scroll over here and see everything. Total Warhammer used to be, let's say, kind of bottom tier for your ability to read, you know, different things and know what's going on, but Total Warhammer now seems to be the golden goose, the highest echelon of like understanding what things do, particularly from the faction screen. So you will have to go in and you'll have to see different stuff and maybe read a guide and things like that. But let's roll up Tech Enclave real quick and I'll just show you some differences. Okay, so what separates Tech as a faction from Visari? Now, Tech has trade. You can put a trade point. You can get 2 income on currency, 1 on mineral, or 1 on crystal. Now that uses some of your slots in orbit, which I'll get into in a second, but just understand you can use 2 slots on extractors or 2 slots on a trade port. Extractors will make 0.45, so 0.9 on 2 slots. A trade port, as I mentioned earlier, makes 1. So trading by default is more efficient than using extractors. And whereas extractors are generally limited, trade is limited, but far less limited. So you can get much more trade to get much more income out of the same planet as other factions. Tech has a very diverse income as well. If I didn't get as many mineral planets, then I can put down trade ports and I can put all those trade points into crystals. If I didn't get much currency planets, then I can put all my income into currency. If I just need a lot of minerals, or so if I just need a lot of metals and currency, then I can just put all my trade into that. Tech is a very rich faction that can just work on trade and make more money than other people and just diversify their income into exactly what they need at that given point in time. In addition, after researching our orbital commerce, we can then research trade ship sensors. All our trades gives us information on the trade ships. So if I put peace with another faction, and you can see here we do have diplomacy. If the player to my right or the player to my left, I maybe look at the player to my left and I say, there's not much for us to fight over, let's just peace. My trade ships will go to his worlds, and I can get information as to what he's doing, even if we're not allied. So if we're doing a free-for-all, if I'm playing tech and I peace with someone, I can get good information on them. The second technology we have here is Garda escorts, light trade escorts. Gardas will travel around and go with my trade ships. If I put trade on all my different worlds and I have trade ships going between those worlds, then what I can do is have these Gardas moving with my trade ships, and they will shoot down corvettes or other ships that are trying to harass my back end. This makes tech much more defensive and makes them much more resilient to trying to be harassed by things like corvettes or light frigates, because I'll have trade ships and I'll have defenders for the trade ships that'll shoot down any amount of light harassment into my backline. This makes tech a defensive faction and makes them very resilient. Now, as for tech enclave, who I'm playing, we get a unique building only for tech enclave, the garrison recruitment. If I have idle factories and I've put down a garrison recruitment in a planetary system, that idle factory will, for free, build up to 125, 250, and then at the super late game, 500 garrison supply of ships. Now, do note the total supply limit is 2,000. So I could hypothetically have 1/4 of a player's supply for free, and this doesn't take it from my supply, it's just for free. I can have a 2,000 fleet of my own, then another 500 within a planet system. I could have a 500 supply defense right here. I can then tell that fleet, sit in my planet system, defend other planets, or go aggressive on nearby enemy worlds. So I could then, hypothetically, have a bunch of factories on a world, and it just builds a bunch of these free supply ships, defending itself, defending nearby allies, or I could have all my worlds building a lot of ships and just sending them into nearby enemy worlds. That's only for tech primacy. Tech enclave. Tech primacy gets pirates and some other things that I won't get into, but I'll just say this is bacon, lettuce, and tomato, and tech primacy is just a pure meat sandwich with mayo. They play differently despite having the same units amongst themselves. Now, if I scroll out here again, and note this is me scrolling out every single time. Every single time I do this, and you can see we can get in and out of matches very quickly. So there's no lag or anything like that. It's a very well constructed game from that perspective. The Advent, on the other hand, instead of having trade and instead of making a lot of money and that sort of thing, the Advent have the Unity abilities. So you can see here our trade center has been replaced with the Temple of Unity. So each Temple of Unity we build does nothing for us and uses our civilian slots, but instead gets us access to these powerful Unity abilities. So if I was to spend 1 Unity, I could get Clairvoyance. So 1 Unity on a 30-second cooldown in a 30-second duration with a focus cost, we can get Clairvoyance to reveal other planets. Or for a 1 Unity cost again, and so we have different costs here, so we could spend 3 Unity to get Tier 3 Recall. At Tier 3 Recall, if we spend 3 focus on it, we spent all the planetary stuff, on a 20-second delay, we could completely recall all our ships from a system back to our capital and then fully heal them, which is pretty powerful. So tech can make a crap load of money, and the Advent can get these very powerful Unity abilities. Alternatively, we could spend all our Unity up here. We get a cost of 2, then 2, then 2. So for 6 Unity in total, which is going to be a lot of planetary resources not doing anything. Okay, but we could heal one of our worlds that are being bombarded for 150 a second for 60 seconds on a 90-second cooldown. This would make it quite difficult for you to take over these Advent worlds. So I was remembering if I was playing Advent, because I don't play this faction. They also start on a different planet, which has slightly different resources available to it here. Instead of more currency, this planet gets a good bit of mining, as well as less research, but more logistics and defenses available to it. So we have a bit of a differences between the factions. Now we can talk about ships here real quick. Whereas tech has generic ships. Let me actually go over tech ships first, just so you can see how, let's say, you can see I'm getting in and out of games here really quick here. Just I want to keep that in mind. We've got the gunship Corvette. It's just a small Corvette and it's got small guns. Light frigate, it's just a light frigate with a gun. Colony ship, siege frigate, it attacks worlds. Flak frigate, you might not believe it, but it has point defense. It shoots down enemy missiles and it tries to take out fighters. The Gauss frigate tries to take out big ships. The carrier just carries in bombers. The Hishoko robotics cruiser is probably the most complicated one, and what it does is it repairs friendly ships, or later on with the technology can actually repair the mana antimatter, but you get it. It repairs the antimatter of our big capital ships, allowing them to use more abilities. Quite powerful. The LRM shoots missiles. You'll never believe it. The heavy cruiser targets and kills ships smaller than it. It's a bully ship. It's tanky and it tries to kill smaller ships. The torpedo cruiser tries to kill titans and capital ships with a torpedo that has infinite pierce. So the LRM is cheaper and takes less supply, but it can't kill titans as well. The torpedo cruiser, for the most part, it's not really said, but its missiles are way more durable and go through point defense way easier. But in return, it mostly tries to target the bigger ships. Then, of course, we have set to our capital ships, which I'll get through in a second. Now, compare that. Now, I'm not going to go over Visari because I don't want to go over every little bit of detail here, right? But if we look at Advent here, their ships play out very differently. They still have the same light, frigate, but theirs is cheaper but does less damage. They, of course, have the Corvette, which is a small, quick hybrid ship capable of storing and transferring antimatter. So this Corvette is capable of storing and giving antimatter to other ships, which is really powerful. It also has a pretty good shield by default, allowing it to soak up hits, get out of combat, restore its shield without dying. We have the same colony ship, the same anti-planet ship, but then their missile ship is a frigate instead of a cruiser, and instead of shooting one missile, shoots like 10 missiles. This allows it to very easily overwhelm point defense and allow your bombers to get through. See, this faction, the Advent, they don't get fighters, they only get bombers. So we can get bombers through point defense by overwhelming them with these Tempests. You might notice the synergy available here to this faction. They do get point defense, but their point defense is triple the supply cost, but only gives almost double the point defense. So for the same 12 supply cost, Tech could get 12 point defense. These people get 7. Tech point defense is far more effective, but they get, a little bit of light lasers on theirs. It's not as good, but it's okay. We've got drones. Their drone hosts are a little bit better than the Tech drones. They have the Guardian. Instead of healing one ship, it just kind of heals a lot of people around it. It can debuff enemies. It can shoot enemies with long-range lasers. And their heavy cruisers, instead of trying to target small little ships, try to target big capital ships. Their capital ships, I'm not going to go over into them in particular, but their capital ships have very many more AoE abilities, support abilities. They tend to work together as a team. Their battleship, instead of having a big laser that tries to do a lot of damage, has a taunt that taunts every other ship to target them. So Advent tends to focus on a lot of synergy, working together, AoE buffs and debuffs, things like that. Tech works on having a lot of point defense to dominate the missile game and shooting their own very powerful missiles into the enemy. Do you get the difference? Okay, so how does a game play out? How does it actually work together? I'm going to look through a replay of a game here. Let's just speed this up maybe to like 5 speed here. Now, we can see here that I decided to go with the Coal Battleship. Now, you have a choice on what you go with, right? So you've got 5 different battleships. Now, this is kind of how I called it Warcraft 3. These are your hero units. Now, you are allowed to build as many of them as you want, but the first one is free. If I want to just build 10 coal battleships, I'm totally allowed to do that. Now, that might not be the ideal way to play, but I'm totally allowed to just build 10 coal battleships if I get the refineries and get the exotic resources for it. And I can then auto-cast their experimental beam, and anytime I right-click an enemy, I'll beam the crap out of them. Okay. So how does the early game then play out? Let's stay at speed 5 here. So we get our hero unit, and we go to a planet, and when you expand, you have to kill these neutral enemies. By killing these neutral enemies, you'll slowly level up. That's kind of how it plays like Warcraft 3. So you can see here we're still level 1, but when we go to our next planet, let me see if we can track that real quick here. Hopefully we get level 2 here, and I can show you. Yep, so now we're level 2. We get more armor, we get more shields, we get more hull, and we do a little bit more DPS on our guns. So, you know, you've got your main ships and they level up. Sometimes when you're zoomed in and you scroll out, it completely bugs out like that. That's generally how the game plays out. From there, you're trying to build up your worlds. Now, how do you build up your worlds? You upgrade your commerce, you upgrade your mining, your logistics, your defense, and research rate. Logistics affects how many civilian slots you can put into orbit. Defense affects how many military slots you can put into orbit. This isn't like Stellaris, you're micromanaging planets, like the population and buildings and things like that. You control what's in orbit, but it's significantly less, let's say, involved. This game isn't so much on the micromanaging your planets, but on the macromanaging your empire and managing your fleet and your technology and things like that. Just to be sure. So there's significantly less micromanagement, and there's significantly less, let's say, things to do on each individual planet. Controlling 10 or 15 worlds, let's say you wipe out another player or you're wrapping up a game, it doesn't get to the point where you're just exasperated and kind of mentally anguished on things to do because there's just way too much to manage, okay? But let's go to battles then. I know there's a battle in this replay right at the end. So you can see here replays work just fine if you're playing 4-player. As you start going up to like 10-player, you start getting to like the hour or 2-hour mark, it'll start slowing down. You can even see here it starts gradually getting a little bit slower as time goes on, and that's because it's actually playing out the match as time goes on. You can see all the voice lines. The replay does go through the different voice lines over and over. It gets a bit, you know, you can see my teammate talking to me. He says, push white, and then he says, I mean, just keep doing what you're doing, because I was pushing white. So it was very odd for him to say that, but, you know, I'm not going to go into that. Okay, let's go into the actual battles themselves here. We have to slow down so you can actually read what's happening here. So in this battle in particular, and let's talk about the icons, because I mentioned the icons earlier. So I need to find the icon for my LRM or my Corvettes or anything, and they don't exactly give away what they are. They're ordered sometimes very weird. Capital ships seem to be first. After that, sometimes I just don't know. So I need to click my LRMs, and you can see I'm targeting his heavy cruisers with my LRMs. His heavy cruisers are targeting my LRMs. That's kind of the best way to use them, but it's not exactly the ideal way to use them. He really should be using them on my Corvettes here. In turn, I'm using my Corvettes and I'm targeting his ships. Now what you can do is if I decided I could target my Corvettes and I could go here. So I right click my Corvettes, sorry, left click my Corvettes here, and I can then target here. So you can see these icons not exactly being perfect, can be a bit frustrating, but I'm sure eventually you'll memorize them. And then I go to his, I think, yeah, here's his Gauss frigate. Now, if I right-click, I distribute fire against the entire stack. If I alt, then right-click, I target each ship one by one. Targeting each ship one by one is actually the ideal way to do it. I didn't even know you could do that until just now. Like, literally today. So what I could be doing is killing all his Corvettes, I could be using my Corvettes to kill all his frigates one by one. That would probably be the far more ideal way to do it. My battleships over here, they're just auto-firing their laser whenever they have antimatter. If I had my Hishokos fully upgraded, I could use them to heal my battleships and also give them more antimatter, mana, so that things could work out. That's generally how battles play out. In this battle, I was right next to his factory. He was setting up defenses. I was just playing from a little bit behind. Maybe I could have tried to stay in the battle, but I just didn't think it was working, so I decided to bail out. Now, if we go forward a little bit, you can see he chased me. Maybe it was a bad idea, but you can kind of see how the battles play out right here. So he chased me in. He chased on my low HP carrier and actually got the kill on it. And then I think he chases down... Does he get the kill on this one? I think he gets the kill on this one. I can't remember if he does. But I'm setting up a repair bay here. I set up a star base here. He was getting out economied because I'd actually ran up and stolen 2 of his asteroids. I had 2 planets out here, so you can see he's trying to make a move before he gets economied into the ground because for some reason he never took his volcano world. Very odd. I think he played too much to expanding here, and I already had this, so I don't know. I guess he just misplayed. But you get, you can see at a glance the supply. So he comes in with 500 supply because he's got heavy cruisers, which are a very big unit. I've only got 400 supply. But the advantage here that I have is I take out his Dunov battlecruiser here, and then I can just turn and I can start taking out his flak frigates. See, he got flak frigates to try to kill my Corvette spam, but all I need to do then is target my ships onto his flak frigates, and once they're down, he doesn't have that much left that can try to take out my capital ships myself. That's just generally how battles go. You take your ships, you target what you think gives you the most advantage, and as you can see, as we continue to take out all these flak frigates, my corvettes are basically going unopposed right now, and despite not being the best against larger ships, you get enough of them, they'll just generally eventually do good. I can't remember. Did I end up losing this ship? I think he ended up losing so many ships that his DPS was going low. And as my Hishokos started to repair, I don't remember. Do I have any Hishokos here? Oh, no, I do. We got 9 Hishokos that are repairing everything. And we've got these retrofit bays that are repairing things. So despite coming into this battle with the supply advantage, he's actually only the same supply as me. He's starting to bleed here. He doesn't want to chase down the cruisers. Or so he doesn't want to chase down the carrier because you have shields, armor, hull, and emergency hull. If a ship is pushed into emergency hull or crippled hull points like this, it cannot attack, it cannot use abilities, it cannot do anything until you repair it enough to get back up the crippled hull. So this ship is literally doing nothing at this point. He brings in his LRMs, but unfortunately, as you can see here, I have point defense on my carriers, which I brought them specifically for, and these LRMs are not able to get through. So he takes this battle thinking he's got a huge supply advantage, but he has to push through my star base. I have a much better economy, so I'm able to build up ships much faster than him. I'm already up to 380 to 311 supply. The battle doesn't work out because as his flak died, he's no longer able to defend his Gauss corvettes. They die. That's how a battle plays out. Do you guys get it? Okay. So managing your ships is easy, but the icon system is really bad. They could really work on that icon system on the right. It's really not the greatest. It's really not the best. I really think they could really improve on that. Post-game stats are pretty good, and replays here are pretty good. We can see planets owned per player. So it looks like white. He just never got that last lava planet. I guess he was just trying to skimp on the research for it. At several points, he was equaling my planets, but I always stayed ahead of him. And then by the end, you can see he was trying to make a big move for it. But as I took his asteroids and, well, I mean, you can see I just got a big advantage on him. So if he had taken that lava planet and he had a better economy, maybe he could have come out ahead. But I was using a lot of my resources to build star bases and kind of choke him into his homeworld. So, and that's just generally how battles play out. So this game is very navigatable. It does make sense. The battles are nice. They're not too fast. That was on 1.25 speed. You can play at 1.0 speed. You can also play at 0.5 speed. In fact, as you make a game, you can actually set up the game entirely how you want. You got game speed, orbiting planet speed, research rate, ship build rate, ship speed, and income rate. You can adjust any of this. You can turn on or off colonization victory. You can turn on or off home planet victory. That's if you kill a home planet, you win the game. And you can turn off orbiting planets if you just want a stable game that nothing ever orbits. I think orbiting is good. It allows the mid game to be more dynamic as some hyperlanes are created or broken as worlds start orbiting around each other. In total, I would say this game is very well made. It's very replayable. It's got a lot of good things for it. Now, within each faction, it can feel that you're playing them out, let's say, the same. Some factions are very different from each other. Tech Enclave and Tech Primacy have a lot of unique researches. Advent don't have so many researches between them, but yeah. The Visari can play very different. Visari Exodus is based very much on eating worlds, blowing stuff up. Visari Alliance plays more normal, so they have a lot more unique researches to differentiate them. But it can feel, if I'm playing Tech Primacy, I'm always going to kind of play the same way, do the same things. If I want to play with the tech units, but I want a different approach to it, I can go Tech Enclave, which can dramatically alter my playstyle to be less piratey and to be more sitting there with big garrisons. I think Tech Primacy is way stronger, but There are some balance patches planned, things like that, but in total, I would say the game plays out very nicely. For now, counter units seem to be a little bit weak, but a lot of that comes down to LRM spam being a bit too strong. I will say they do have a fix planned for the LRM issue. Right now, if you spam enough LRMs, you will eventually overwhelm even equal point defense, because point defense doesn't seem to be too smart on what it targets when there's too many missiles. They do have a plan to fix that, to make it so if I bring in 10... Well, if I bring in 100 LRMs, long-range missiles, and you bring in 100 point defense, the point defense will beat the LRMs. Right now, the LRMs will actually win because the point defense gets overwhelmed, like, mentally. Especially once you start bringing fighters and bombers and trying to do multiple tasks at the same time. They just get overwhelmed and they don't do their roles quick enough, which can lead to battles being a bit not interesting as you just right-click the opposing Titan or battleship. So far as technologies, for those of you who want big long games with big long range stuff, the reason I did call it Supreme Commander is that as you start getting later and later into the game, you start getting outrageously powerful technologies and outrageously powerful things you can do. You can get Titans. Where are Titans? You can get Titans up here. You can get double fortresses over here. Tech in particular can reduce the build time of their ships by half, which is outrageously strong. Once again, this is not build time reduction. This is build time increase. You can never get your ships to 0 build time. You can get them to very small build time. You can't get them to 0. This is kind of important because their tooltips, as I said, aren't entirely correct and give kind of a wrong idea here. Over here, tech can get a very insane economy because your empire earns as income a fraction of all other empires' incomes. If tech gets to the super late game, they literally just tax every other empire on the map indefinitely, forever, permanently. It's very powerful. Tech effectively reaches infinite money once they get this, especially if you're doing a 5v5 or a 10-man free-for-all. This basically gives you unlimited money to spam as much as you want. Things in the late game can start getting quite powerful. That's why I was saying this starts getting very Supreme Commander in the late game. The early to mid game feels much more Warcraft 3 with that battle I showed you playing out. In the late game, as you are shoving in 10 ships to their death every 10 seconds, it can start feeling a little bit more Supreme Commander oriented. Yeah. So that's about what I would say for this game. I think the UI plays out very well. One thing in particular I want to talk about, and let me do this real quick. Your first hero / capital ship is free. So I'm going to shove this dude into a fleet. I'm going to hotkey this fleet to 1. Now, when I click this, when I click 1, it will open up my fleet menu. I can then build to my fleet at any time. It will then check any nearby factories capable of building, and what it will do is it will build these ships out of these nearby factories automatically. So despite never opening these factories and despite never putting them into the unit grouping, we can see here that it will slowly build these ships out of this light factory here. The light factory builds the light frigates. And they will go to link up with my fleet. A lot of space games have issues where as you reach the late game, it becomes more and more tedious to play the game to the point where you really don't want to play. But if I want to build 5 more frigates, I just click 5 and it'll just queue up 5 more. It'll find the nearest factories and they'll immediately join my fleet. Very useful, very potent. If I build 10 battleships, do I need to manage every 10 battleship? No, I can right click and autocast experimental beam. Now, anytime it's focusing a target, it will experimental beam its target. Very powerful, very good, very not annoying. You can autocast literally anything in the game. There's only one thing in the game that can't be autocast, and it's a bug right now, and they're eventually going to work on it. So far as that, so far as the playing the game, the tedium, it's not tedious at all. It's quite useful. In fact, what gets better if you want, I want to queue up this research right here. So what I do is I build this. Here's a civilian research. This gets me to 1 research, which unlocks civilian 1. So what I can do, so long as I have this queued up, not built, but queued up, I can then queue up if I just want this research right here, I click this, which then queues up Civilian 1. So it will, in turn, build the civic research station using an orbital thing, then start getting progress towards Civilian 1, then research-focused exploration. If I want to do that much, I can actually queue up all this stuff right here. I never need to look back at my research. It will build this, then queue up the research tier, then queue up every single one of these researchers in an order. Very good, and allows me to go off and manage my empire in the middle of battles, because I can queue up 3-4 researches in a row, then go manage the battle, and it'll just go through all those researches. It's a very nice system. This sounds obvious, and like every game should have this, and yes, this is obvious, and yes, every game should have this, but they don't, which is why I, for some reason, need to mention that it's actually in the game. So, there you go. Overall, Sins of Solar Empire 2, is it worth it? Is it worth the money? Is it a fun game? Yes, I think it's actually very much worth it. For $40 right now, I would very much say it's worth your money. So thank you all for watching, thank you all for being here, and as always, have a great rest of your day. Oh, and one last thing, I do play this game semi-often, so if you join my Discord, I will ping people. If you want to just join games and play with me, it's totally fine. If you're looking for people to play with, I might beat you, but we'll see. You might beat me. Anyway, thank you all for watching. As always, have a great rest of your day.